the workplace is still saying things like, well, grind yourself into your day. And the same stuff we're just talking about, where the workplace doesn't say life is okay or having some sort of work-life balance. Like, I think everybody who says work-life balance sees it as a joke. Like, that's just not a real thing. And so for me, the real interest came in selfishly, being a science nerd. It's like, this is a leverage point. This is a leverage point where if everything is focused in on the workplace, well, now the workplace becomes the place where you can start to make better people, where you can start building systems and societal norms that make better people.
Welcome to Unpacked Culture Chronicles. I'm Danielle Marshall, an equity strategist and executive coach, and I'm thrilled to have you here. This podcast is all about exploring cultural differences, similarities, and the ways that we can begin to bridge across them. Together, we're going to dive into meaningful conversations with guests from all walks of life. We'll share stories, insights, and practical strategies for navigating the complexity of culture in our workplaces, communities, and personal lives. Welcome to Unpack Culture Chronicles. I'm your host, Danielle Marshall, executive coach, equity strategist, and a lover of deep conversations. And today's guest is someone who's pushing the boundaries of how we understand workplace culture. Kelly Blackmon brings a perspective that is rooted in systems, strategy, and lived experience. And he's inviting us to look beyond buzzwords and get really clear about what culture actually is. And I'm excited for you to hear directly from Kelly about how he approaches culture, identity, and leadership in his work. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Hey, Danielle. First, let me just say, I love that intro. Like, I felt special. I felt like I'd done things in life. But thank you.
Well, you're about to tell us more of what you've done in life, and I appreciate that either way, but I'd love for you to
Yeah.
start us off by simply introducing yourself and sharing more about the work that you do.
Okay. So again, Kelly Blackmon. I'm considered a change management specialist or change management consultant. Um, Typically, what that means is work-wise, what I do is whether it's learning and development, DEI, culture, whatever happens in a workplace, my job is to help make transitions smooth. And I'll give you my short hero origin story. Notice I'm a hero in the story. Um, about 6, 7 years ago, I realized that the world was lacking emotional intelligence, like hard self-awareness. I'm a certified practitioner, emotional intelligence practitioner, and when I started seeing that gap in the workplace, it was like, oh, this is a key thing to use in a business sort of way, but also just very generally, people seem to be lacking these skills. So fast forward a little bit, I started up my company, BE Consulting, stands for Butterfly Effect, and I'll come back to that later. But what eventually happened was a little thing called COVID happened, and then
Mm.
another small thing, George Floyd was murdered. And there was this sort of gap there in people's understanding. So there was a lot of pain, anger, like very visceral emotions, and people didn't really know how to deal with them. So that became kind of my starting point, really trying to find bridges for the way that humans sort of relate to one another. And it really is just sprawled into what I do now, which is I help to build company culture. But really, I use the company as a leverage point because societally, we're still lacking all of the same stuff. Human relations, really, relational intelligence is kind of in a bad place. And you see it all across social media and polarization across how people can't really talk to one another. So that's my space. I do it at workplaces because those places pay me, and I do it to try to leverage that to make the world a better place.
Yeah. I deeply appreciate that. I think there's some parallels even in our work from what you just said, because I am dealing with polarization much the same as you are. And I'm wondering, like, have you seen anything change maybe for the positive? Give us some hope here as we kick off this call around like emotional intelligence, so forth. Like, has anything shifted?
So this is my personal opinion, and this is me going to hundreds of organizations and doing these assessments. No, it's been bad and it's getting to worse. But the good
Yeah.
thing about this is that it is a pendulum swing. So what happens typically is that you'll see these sort of cultural shifts. So the fact that we don't really talk to one another, or we don't really know how to relate to one another, and that sort of thing, it's bad on its face, but it also brings up the need that's there. So if you talk to like a Gen Zer now, they're able to tell you about cultural intelligence. They're able to tell you about things like self-awareness. Like they're
Mhm.
becoming more educated because they've seen the lack and they've seen the need for it. So I think that if we're looking for a positive, it's that it can only get so bad before we have to adjust. And human nature says we'll get better.
Yeah, yeah. I was hoping we could maybe take a positive spin with that one, but, like, let's deal with the reality of where we are, and I think so I can see this is gonna be a fun conversation already,
Yeah.
right? We have to deal with what is. But the hope perhaps is that we will eventually be able to turn
Oh
a
yeah.
corner on
Yeah.
this. And even as you sort of shifted into mentioning Gen Z, it is
Yeah.
interesting that they have access to far more
Yes.
information than we ever had
Yes.
before. But what you just said, I think maybe I hadn't considered it from this angle before. I've always believed that they talk about these things because they have access, i.e.,
Yeah.
social media, so forth. That it's a lot more readily available. But this
Yep.
idea that maybe us older folks have messed something up along the lines, and they're needing
Yeah.
to find language to articulate what it is that they're
Yeah.
now experiencing, right?
You know what's
That's
interesting
profound.
about well, look, I'll say this. Necessity is born out of hardship, if you really think about it. So the fact that I think about my parents and their generation, these are the people who'd be like, "Oh, you black so and so," or "You're so fat," or "You're," like all of our nicknames were like some sort of knock on us, like, "Oh, hey, square head," like that was their way. And when we see that pendulum shift, we'll see it swing toward our generation was probably considered overly permissive and that sort of thing.
Right,
So when I think about it from that point of view, the really cool thing is that if you become aware of it, it allows you to try to create this sort of center, this sort of balance. And then that way you're not having to kind of shift from one bad extreme to another bad extreme. So the baby boomers are notorious for like shooting from the hip, and then our parents are a little bit less that way, and then we're kind of total opposites. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, but when I think
same.
about it, that really starts to open up that understanding for like, okay, well, cool, we messed some stuff up, but at least we see the formula now, and that to me is probably the best news ever.
Yeah. And I can see that because what I'm noticing with, and I have a daughter who's also Gen Z. I'm a Gen Xer as well.
Yep, yep,
When I look at her and her friends and just how a lot of Gen Zs are moving through the world right now, I think they're moving with a certain intentionality, right? That I haven't
yeah, yeah,
necessarily
yeah,
seen. Like they want to shift the culture.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and that does give me hope. I mean, I know not everyone thinks the same way about culture.
yeah,
I'll put that out there as well. But I think they're paying attention to what has happened over
yep,
time and also saying, like,
yep,
how can we, whether it's workplace culture, like, hey, I need a more casual place. I want to work
yep,
remotely. I
yep,
want people
yep,
to interact with me in this particular way. They're showing up different.
yep.
And I love it. Like, so I know there's a lot of complaints about Gen
Yeah,
Z
right.
and even the millennials, quite frankly, but like, I love them
Yep,
because I'm like, you all want everything yesterday, but I
yep.
appreciate some of the things you want. And like for Gen Xers, I kind of wish our generation would have asked for more.
Yes, yes. I'll be honest with you. I think one of the biggest upsides to that is also the thing that we all complain about. Oh, they're so entitled and they want everything now. Well, but when you think about it, my generation, we would go to work and say, well, my boss didn't physically punch me, so I got yelled at. But I mean, like they didn't
It's
stomp
good
me in the
enough.
face. So, I got a job. I'm gonna keep a job. When you see the Gen X, my son told me this. He was like, and this is so crazy to me. He was working at like AT&T or something, and he's like, they want me to work such and such schedule. I need to go to the gym. I'm not gonna sacrifice my health for a job. It's like, what?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
But then again, my son also lives with me, so that's a much easier decision to make then. But just
Yeah.
the gall and the entitlement, I was like, wow, I didn't know that those were things people could say.
Well, and see, and I tend to think about it. I appreciate that you use those words, but like I don't think about it as entitlement. I think about they care about themselves, right? Like
Yeah,
we're
right,
even in
right.
society right now, we're shifting again into this place where people are like, "Hey, we just want you to be a cog in the wheel. You punch the clock,
Yes,
you come in, you do
yes,
this work." And I'm like, I don't want to return to those days.
yep,
I want to be able to go to the gym, spend time with the
yep,
family, go hang out with
yep.
friends after work, like have a life. And
What that is such a crazy notion, right?
it
Have a
feels
life.
like it right now. It certainly
Yeah.
does. Okay, so now that we've explored a little bit of Gen
Yes.
Z and so forth, I wanted to know from you when we first got in contact with one another, one of the first things
Mhm.
you said is, "I can't believe you have like a podcast dedicated to talking about culture." Tell me about what your interest is in culture and like why this is meaningful to you.
Well, boy, see that's the deep one because on a personal side, when I got started in like culture, change management work, that sort of thing, it was really a personal journey. It was me learning myself and becoming self-aware and honing in on like how I show up in the world and that sort of thing. And initially what I saw was nobody's doing this. There's a book by Tasha Eurich. She basically says 85% of people are not self-aware. And when you're not self-aware, you don't really understand how you show up. So you don't understand your impact and that sort of thing. So when I started to learn that, and it really opened up and honestly gave me agency. Uh, one for
Mm,
me, but then two for how our systems work. So familial systems, religious systems, workplace systems. And you and I kind of talked about this a little bit as we see now those foundational sort of institutions are maybe not dying out, but definitely in Western culture they're weakening. So we've seen probably a 30 to 40% drop in like people doing religious things or going to church or synagogues or mosques, that sort of thing. We've seen I want to say the last stat I saw was about 70% of people don't know their neighbors. So community has also dropped off. And as far as like generations of family members, we have less connection with different generations of our families. So if you think about it, those are typically the places where we learn culture. Those are the places where we learn what's acceptable, what's not, for better or for worse. Those are places where we learn how to relate to other people.
mhm,
And in a very large way, the last standing institution is the workplace. So for me, it became like, oh, wait, the workplace wasn't made for that. The workplace is still saying things like, well, grind yourself until you're dead. The same stuff we're just talking about, where the workplace doesn't say life is okay or having some sort of work life balance. Like, I think everybody who says work life balance sees it as a joke, like that's just not
yeah,
a real thing. And so for me, the real interest came in selfishly being a science nerd, it's like this is a leverage point. This is a leverage point where if everything is focused in on the workplace, well, now the workplace becomes the place where you can start to make better people, where you can start building systems and societal norms that make better people. So in a lot of ways, that's my interest in it. And again, it comes from a very nerdy place, but hopefully it's like altruistic enough that, it's still a good thing.
yeah. I'm appreciating that, and I wanna come back to that in just a second because
Yep.
here's the thing, as people are listening to this, right, we've talked about religious institutions,
Mhm.
multi-generational neighborhoods, just all the institutions we might have had in the past that feel like they might be disappearing in some respect. So we're trading those in order to spend more time at work in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
right, and that's where we build
Yep.
our relations. Should we be focusing on all of those institutions, or are you saying you wanna double down on the workplace right now?
Well, so here's the only problem. I don't know how to make people more religious or how to make people want to
That's
be
fair.
around family. Yeah, I mean, so in my mind, it comes down to where do we have the most agency? Now, in my family, I have my mother and father, but we don't have all. always have the best relationship. So now it's, should I have my son around my father or my mother-in-law if I don't think they're good people, that sort of thing. And that becomes a little bit more of a, that's a tougher situation than really the one place where everyone is almost
You
expected to
have
get
to go.
along. Yeah,
Mhm.
like, so work is the one place where we're all forced to still go, or we're forced to be around each other. We're forced to relate. We're forced to try to work it out. And specifically, this is I wrote a book called Future Proof in HR, and it's really based on the idea that HR becomes like the dropping place for all of our crap. So all of the bad stories, all
Yeah.
of the bad intentions, everything that's gone wrong, they're the soap opera group of a workplace. So really, it's like that is a huge leverage point. So yeah, I think in a lot of ways, for me, I'm a pretty religious guy, and religiously, I have a huge group of people that I bounce stuff off of, and they correct me, and I correct them. Same thing with family. I got a huge family, but in general, those institutions are lean right now. So for the general public, I think you got to go where the people are.
Yeah. I'm definitely appreciating that, right? This idea of follow the thread, right? So if the people are
Yeah,
at
yeah,
work and all of us have to make a living, we have to eat at on some level.
yep,
Um, I can definitely appreciate that. I part of me wants, right? I have a desire for my life to not revolve completely around work. And I say this even
yeah,
working for myself, but like I see
yep,
the value in having more balance. But you
yep,
picked up on that term like work-life balance, and I don't believe in that anyway. It's more like integration
yeah,
for me. Not
yeah,
not balance.
yeah, yep.
But, so the workplace now carries more of a burden
Mhm,
in terms of
mhm.
helping us to build these relationships. And clearly, sometimes it goes well. And then sometimes, this is why people refer to workplaces as toxic because it may not be going
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
How do we rise to meet the occasion?
So the good part is it's the exact same thing everywhere because I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I don't know that I've met anyone who's gone to work and the work was ever the problem. Like the work is the work usually. The people
Yeah.
are always the problem. It's always the people, which has, in my opinion, I don't have any data for this, but I think people are tired of people. And I think you see it from everything from social media to the politics of how we weaponize DEI. Like, I think all of these things are about people not really understanding how to be human or better humans. So when I think about the solution, it really just, it's so simple. It comes down to how do you integrate human centricity into our systems? How do you operationalize that?
Mm.
A good example would be whenever I consult, whenever I work with a company, and they'll come to me and they'll say, "Well, our NPS scores are dropped such and such a percentage. People don't trust our leadership." Blah blah blah. The first thing I say is, well, how do you communicate? Because we're people. Communication is such a key thing. Well, we have a monthly town hall. Okay, how do people communicate with you? Well, they tell their managers, and their managers tell, their upper managers who tell leadership. And well, that's not really communicating. So what I'll suggest is something super simple. You have Slack, you have Teams, you have whatever way you all communicate. Why don't you have an open loop, an anonymous loop, where the people highest in charge can receive messages from the people who are frontline employees. And it can simply be an anonymous survey that they tell you what's going on. And as a feedback loop, when it comes down to that newsletter or that town hall or whatever you're going to do, you bring those things up. You tell them, I heard you. This is what's going on. And it's such a weird thing because people are like, leaders a lot of times are afraid of that because it makes you
Mm.
accountable. It puts it puts something on the plate that you have to worry about. But from the employee point of view, you were listened to and now you were considered. And if you think about things that humans need to feel valued, being listened to, being considered, those are super high on the list. So when I think about like what has to happen for things to get better, it really comes down to systematizing, operationalizing being human. So it's not rocket science at all, but a
Mhm.
lot of times I think our fear is like gonna stop us from trying.
Yeah. I'm just sitting with a couple of things that you just said.
Yep,
Y- One, I love the fact that the solution that you're bringing forth is a simple one because I think in a day and age where we all feel burdened by being pulled in like a
yep,
thousand different directions,
yep,
sometimes simple is the best way for us to go. But I think the power in what you also said was when you were talking about the feedback loop. As a consultant, I am with many organizations who collect a vast amount of data.
yep,
They
yep.
get feedback, they get surveys, that you name it, they're collecting it. And I'm like, "Well,
Yep.
what happened with it?" And they're like,
Yes,
"Oh,
what do
we
you
we
do?
did a couple of little small things on the back end." And I'm like, "Did you
Yeah.
tell the people what you did?
Yep,
Did you
yep,
acknowledge? Did you thank them?"
yep.
And so to me, like, even part of being human is demonstrating as a leader in your organization that you value that I took time to sit down and
Yes,
share my thoughts with
yes.
you, right?
Let me ask you this, as a consultant, when people don't do that, what do you I don't know if they tell you, but what do you pick up as the reason why they won't?
Well, why they want I think you were spot on, like, so one of the reasons I think people don't wanna go there well, actually, there's a couple of reasons. I think there
Okay.
is some fear for them.
Yeah.
If I mention this, how are people gonna look at me? Because this
Yep,
is not one person's complaint now, right?
yep,
This is 15% of the organization, 20% of the organization said, "We're unhappy or displeased with this particular thing."
yep,
And sometimes they're not even saying they're displeased fully, they're just saying, "We wish this was a little bit
yep,
better."
yep,
Right? So
yep,
I think there's that piece that we're looking at. But the other thing that I think gets in people's way is it might be over analysis, right? Leads to this paralysis for them because
yep,
there's too
yep,
much data. So instead of like going after a smaller subset, I have 3 to 5 questions I want to ask you on this topic. They've
yep,
sent out a 100 question
yep,
survey,
yep.
and now like, well, where do we even start with this? Because everything feels wrong. And so like those are some of the things that I see. But I am curious, like, are you seeing something different from your vantage point?
No, no, it's the same. It's I would say that the basis is fear and when I'll say this, when all of the problems that I see throughout relational work is almost always fear. And when I say fear, I mean specifically uncertainty. Like I think that there is a definite fear of uncertainty that's greater than the bad thing. So I think when you get all of that data, because we're told we're supposed to collect all of that data. I
Right.
know orgs that are doing weekly pulse surveys, like weekly pulse surveys.
Yep.
And they'll ask like, well, what should we do with this? It's like, well, you typically should have a plan of what to do with that in the beginning, but then it's like, well, what do you want to do with it? And it's like, well, we don't know, but we don't know not because we haven't Googled what do you do with the survey data. We don't know because if we make a move, and that moves to the thing you're mentioning about the paralysis, if we make a move, there's a possibility of someone taking it the wrong way or a possibility of a bad thing. I'll give you one more that I've seen. There's a thousand people, a thousand person organization, and they had to lay off 9 people. It was a riff. They had to lay off 9 people. Not a whole lot of people, right? They decided. We talked about this, but they decided we're not gonna bring this up to the general public, the general staff, because it's
Mhm.
only 9 people and it's only their team that's affected. We don't want to cause a panic. And obviously, 2 days later, the
Yeah.
whole organization knew it's on social media. People are drilling them. And the reality is that their
Mhm.
fear that they were going to do something caused them to really bring out the worst in people because people's uncertainty, like they didn't give them a narrative to follow. So people's
Yeah.
uncertainty led to every bad thing instead of it just being the one.
Yeah, and that's interesting because it's uncertainty in 2 dimensions for me, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
happening at the
Yeah.
the upper level of management, but it's
Yep.
also
Yep.
happening, like, when we as leaders are nervous and uncertain about things, there is
Yep.
trickle down
Yep.
to our team members as well, and
Hmm.
so and I've sat in situations where things were not communicated fast enough when there
Mm-hmm.
were layoffs or even when someone left of
Oh,
their own accord.
yep.
Now
Yep.
people are making up stories and there are all these
That's right.
narratives, and so, yeah, I could see why that's problematic.
Think that part that you mentioned about that uncertainty being at each level, I think that is the danger. And that's honestly for me the variable in any situation I'm trying to solve for.
Yeah. So what do we lay as a foundation to help us? Right? If you know that we're gonna have to go in and we're gonna do this work, you wanna be able to get surveys, you wanna make sure that we mitigate any uncertainty that might come up. How do we get started?
So for me, I couldn't find anything established that gave like the blueprint or the roadmap. So what I did is I created what I call the culture EQ framework, and it's basically like it's an implementation guide, but it's essentially like let's let's start off with grounding everyone who comes to the table. So stakeholders in general. So usually I'll be brought in by like HR, but it's well, let's isolate where these problems are. So let's start off with uh, an assessment, obviously, but let's find out where people are afraid. Let's find out where the power dynamics are. And to me, it's like that almost gives you uh that gives you the ability to create a narrative for each group or each subgroup that allows you to kind of say, we're going to walk this way. So what I'll find is leadership while having all of the power of the organization behind them are very fragile and very lonely and very afraid because of those things because they're so isolated and everyone's afraid, no one talks to them and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
having that conversation up front allows me to really bring them on board versus having it be something that if we do a listening session, they're going to be so afraid or so offended or so hurt or so worried that they won't do it or they'll step away and even if they don't physically, emotionally. So really, to me, it's laying the emotional groundwork to help people to become not only self-aware but like stronger and more resilient, doing that
Mhm.
at each level for each level of stakeholder. So usually it's going to be leadership, middle management, and staff.
So, oh boy, you're bringing up so many questions for me, even as I just hear you describe that. So, like, and I love a good framework. So I'm going to put that out there right now. But when you say, we're talking about emotional intelligence, what does that conversation sound like when you go into a business where emotion is just never talked about? You're like,
Yeah,
friends, we're going to
yeah,
talk about emotional intelligence in here.
yeah.
How does that go?
Well, so uh, I don't want to let the cat out the bag too much, but it's coded. You don't, if you've ever talked to someone about one of the taboo subjects, you can't really talk about it. You really have to kind of
I got
draw it
you.
out. So
Okay.
in most cases, we start off with the problem X, and well, what do you think that's coming from? Oh, okay. Well, why did you think that that was the case? Okay, and that five whys. And usually when you get to a certain point where it starts to reflect back to something that they can control or something that they were accountable for, then you can say, well, okay, contrary to what you may be thinking, what if, and then it starts to open it up. And for me, I have I hope it's a skill, but I told you I ask a lot of questions. And I think when you help people to arrive at it on their own, you're not drawing up those defenses. So then it's just a
Yeah.
conversation and it's, oh my God, I feel, you know what I discovered? That if I would have, thank you, perfect.
I can't help but laugh because I'm also a coach, and so I'm right there with you. I think the
Yeah.
power of inquiry, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
to help
Yep.
people arrive because again, it's not that we need, and actually if you told them, "Here is your challenge," they probably would not
Yep.
receive it the same
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
as them realizing it for themselves. So I definitely appreciate that.
100%.
And I don't want you giving away any, proprietary secrets here on this show, but I definitely appreciate the questions. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so you find then people are more receptive to doing the work as their
Mhm.
sort of the self-discovery process is happening.
Well, for me, it's about me being curious, and me being curious opens a space up for them to come out and to really draw them out more. So I don't think they're ever aiming to be more self-aware or aiming to be like better at this or that. I think it's just a natural progression as you leave space for people. If we say this is the promised land, this is the X we're trying to solve for, and then you let them talk it out. It's like being a therapist, really. It's really about helping them to find their own solution.
Yeah. Yes, I'm with you on that. This episode of Unpacked Culture Chronicles is brought to you by Culture Principles, a coaching and consulting practice helping people build real inclusion from the inside out. Because inclusion isn't just about policies, it's also about our people. And while strong policies matter, it's cultural awareness that brings them to life. Our cultural competency coaching program supports leaders, team members, and change makers alike in showing up with greater clarity, confidence, and care. To learn more, visit us at culture-principles.com/coaching. We'd love to work with you. Let me pivot a little bit.
Okay.
You've been in service to others for a really long time, and I'm curious how you know when your work is truly having the impact that you intend.
Jeez, this is what is it? Sisyphus pushing this boulder up the hill all the time because I I I set goals, but you never really know until it's fully worked out. So I did a presentation at SHRM about a month ago and in San Diego. And here's the thing, last minute, I realized that I wanted to change up my talk. So it's an hour talk, but my talk starts at 7:30 in the morning. And I realized at the last minute, so night before, I'm like, oh my God, I have to get this updated. I fell asleep on it. I never finished it. And I'm going into the spot wrecked, like just emotionally, like, God, I'm sorry. I let you down, buddy. This is on me. Like, I'm having that feeling, right? I go in, it kills, like 300 people there, and I had people telling me, like, "This is the best thing that I've seen at Sherman. I've been coming for years." I had people invite me out, "Hey, let's work on this together, blah, blah, blah." So I think it's a really tough to have a sort of litmus test. So for the most part, and this is again me pushing this boulder up the hill, I keep my head down and I just do the work. I try to stay aligned with the purpose so that I don't always have to have like some signal of the work doing well. But if I'm not hurting people and if it seems to be helping, that's what I go with.
Yeah. I definitely appreciate that. It's also a hard thing to master in this day and age of, we do things for likes. We do it for the gram, if you will.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
Staying focused and for me, I think as I'm even considering that question for myself, like impact it's defined differently depending on what's going
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
right? And but
Yeah.
the question is who sets your measure of success for you,
Yeah. Yep.
you know?
Oh, that's so true.
Um I want to ask you a question, and I didn't plan to ask you this, but when we first connected, you told me that you had a podcast a long time ago yourself. Okay,
Yep.
and you talked with people who were struggling to overcome maybe some challenges, right? And so
Yep.
I see parallels to even what we're talking about right now because there are challenges in
Yeah.
organizations, there are challenges that we might have outside the walls of the workspace. And as you reflect back on that, like what did you learn from those conversations that maybe shapes the way that you lead change today?
Yep. I'll be honest with you. I had the reason it started, it was called How to Win at Everything, and the reason I started it was because I, s- it, it, in my mind, I was seeing these little bitty leverage pieces. Now, later on, I come to find out there's this whole thought, train of thought called complexity theory. And it's this whole idea about if there are little bitty leverage pieces, if you can hit them in the right way at the right time, it has like a huge effect. And that's why I'm BE consulting for butterfly effect because that is a real
Mm,
thing. So in my mind, it was let's explore like these regular people like who are probably very much saying I'm not doing it well or I'm not doing it right or I'm not getting enough life done. And it would be people who are, like reconciled with their mothers or, people who were on drugs and got off and, like regular life stuff. Because my opinion was that if I can show this to other people and we can kind of expose the formula, because the formula was the same all the time. It was all about like becoming more self-aware, being empowered, gaining agency, that sort of thing. Uh, and for me, taking all of that, uh, I really have put this in at work to work in organizations because again, it's a very repeatable formula where it's really about us having enough courage or enough support to become
Yeah,
resilient enough to ask the questions that we don't want to ask, and then to look at the data and to plan what's next. And that's literally all I do in an organization. Um, and I think the reality is that the probably one of the biggest things that this show helped me to do and understand is to understand how to dive into someone's personal stuff, because the people will come on the show and we do it live. So it was either
Ooh,
you're yeah, either you're live answering questions about, how you stopped being overly promiscuous and became a preacher, or, you're stuck there going,
yeah.
so that was that, but I think that's probably one of the biggest skills, one of the biggest things I've learned, how to be in those uncomfortable spaces and stay grounded, stay balanced so that other people can have comfort and be drawn out.
Yeah. And I do think that is definitely a skill to practice, right?
I'm
I
sure
don't know
you
that
do.
we
You
ever get
have
to
it.
mastery on that, but it is a practice ongoing. But I'm wondering, because this is something that you've like leaned into and now is still informing your work today, like if you
Yeah.
could leave this audience with like one tip to stay grounded, right? I would love to give them an action. What can they do?
Ooh, probably the most root level thing you can do is get somebody you trust to tell you about you. So probably trust is a kind of a loaded word, but somebody who is emotionally mature, who you believe is emotionally mature, and then say to them, "How do I show up?" I think that is
Yeah.
probably a great starting point because even if they're wrong, it allows you to look in and to think. Probably the other thing that may be just as good, journaling. Journaling is like, it really is, especially if you do it for a long enough time, it's really like holding up a mirror to yourself. And if you got the courage and the strength to keep looking at it, yeah, you're bound to change. You're bound to open up yourself to have an agency to change.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I smiled as you said, and I think both are really valid actions that we
Hmm.
can take. But I smiled as you were saying the piece around like ask someone to tell you about
Yeah.
yourself. And this just happened this week, as a matter of fact. One of my good friends, hi Ariel. I will make sure she gets a copy of this. She is a marketing person. And
Hmm.
I had been updating some materials on my end around my brand voice, right? So this is
Yep.
me. This is how I show up. And
Yep.
I show it to her as both my friend and a marketing person. And she goes, "That's not your voice." And I was like, "What do you mean?"
Oh.
But
Oh.
and she's like, "No, no, don't get me wrong." She's like, "It's sort of your voice, but you're missing a piece."
Yep.
And I was like,
Yep.
"Well, then tell me about myself." And she kind of laughed and we laughed for a second. And I was like, "No, seriously, tell me about, me." And so she basically came back. She said,
Right.
"Everything you have on this paper is right." She goes, "But you don't mince words. Like you get straight to the point." She's like, "You're nice about it
Yep.
and all that." She's like,
Yep.
"But you're a truth teller." And I said, "Oh, that's right. We need to work that into this plan because I absolutely am." And it
That's
tickled
interesting.
me
Yep.
because it wasn't necessarily how I view myself. I know that this is true about myself, right? I don't deny
Yeah.
that. And it wasn't the first thing that came to mind. And because
Huh.
she was, to your point, a trusted person in
Yeah.
my community, I have heard feedback from a great many people over my life. I do not value all of the feedback I've gotten from every individual.
Right. Right.
However, in the context of, so whether it's work or it might be,
Yeah.
even self-development at that point,
Yep.
there are
Yep.
times we need to hear someone's like, "Well, maybe you could be a little abrasive," or "I'm
Yeah.
noticing these things about you. Have you seen this?" We
Man, I
we
get
have
that a
our own
lot.
blind
Yeah.
spots.
Yeah. Yep.
We have our own blind spots.
Look, here's my question for you though. Um, you seem to have like a rare ability to do it. Because most people, they take it as an insult, or they clam up. That fear kicks in about I don't know what they're about to tell me. What made you be able to hear that, to take that, and then to ask more questions and say, "Yeah, let me find out more about where." Like it's almost like you were craving it to know.
Yeah. I will not say I've always been like this. Like I have definitely had times in, my early 20s, we will say in particular, where I did not want to hear that kind of
Sure.
feedback, right? As a young person, we often think we know better than
Yeah.
other people, and so it's hard to take it in. But you see my sign above me, my stay curious, right? Like I
Yeah.
lean into
Yeah.
that as a mantra in my world because I
Yeah.
realize the more curious I am, the more I learn, the more I grow, the better I get at things. But if I assume I know everything off the top, then there's no room for growth. And so you
Yep.
actually, by assuming you know better, have said there's
Yeah.
nothing
You
left
just
for me
stunned
to learn.
yourself. Yep. Yep.
And so I view myself as a lifelong student. And if I am going to
I
live
like
into
that.
that value of education, of learning, I have to stay curious.
Gotcha. Look, I know you're interviewing me. I got one more though.
I love it.
Well, okay, because here's the thing for me. I really believe that that's a true thing about staying curious, and I'm always curious about people who are able to do it because, for me, I guess I do it, but it's really hard to see mine. What are you doing in the in between times? Like, are you ever in that space where you're like, nope, 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 la la la, nope, nope,
Yes.
nope, nope? Are you okay?
Okay, we're gonna you and I are gonna have to have another conversation because I have
Okay,
so much to say on this topic.
okay,
But before I even get to like what do I do in the in between spaces, I see you very much from the first interaction that we had together. You are a curious person by nature.
oh
Like
yeah,
you got on and I'm talking to you about like the podcast and how we can get the right questions set up for you and make this, all about sort of highlighting your work. And you're like, but I have a question for you. Even as we're having
uh,
this
yeah.
conversation.
Sorry,
And so I think to me, like, that's the beauty of it, and
yeah,
there's no apology about it, right? It's just like, I'm just gonna stand on this. It matters to me, and to me, I take that curiosity as I care enough to even ask
yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah.
right? Think about how many times we engage with people and they don't
Daily.
even ask the question. You could be like, "Oh, my back is hurting." They're like, "Oh, that's great. Have a seat over here," and, like,
Mhm,
keep it
mhm.
moving, and they're not worried about anything.
Yep,
Um,
yep,
but to get back to the question that you asked around the in between times, and I'm gonna ask that maybe as our closing question on this loop too. Like, what do you do on those in between times? I have a practice because I have encouraged my own clients, particularly those that
yeah,
are on like a cultural competency journey, to be curious, right? And I focus a lot on culture because that's my space. But my
mhm,
thing is, I want you to be curious in over whatever makes sense to you. You read a new book, you hear a new term,
yep,
you take your kids out to a new adventure over the weekend. Like what's sparking that desire to learn, right? And it could
yeah,
simply be all of us at some point have fallen down the Google, rabbit hole where you're like, I'm just going to look up one thing. What's this celebrity been up to? And 15 minutes, 30 minutes later, you're like, okay, well,
mhm,
I've wasted all this
mhm,
time. But it's because you could feel yourself being curious in that moment and you're getting
yeah,
sucked deeper and deeper into it. So I'm like, just follow those natural tendencies. We all have something that we want to be curious about.
I like
Um,
that,
and
yeah,
when I don't want to be curious, my curiosity is still present because maybe it's not in that moment, but it may be later. And it's just like, hey, Danielle, you really should
okay,
have asked a different kind of question, or you should have asked a question, or you should have engaged them and you didn't. And now I have to sit with myself and I'm like, what was happening for you? What are you noticing about
it
that
leads to more
context?
questions, huh?
Yes,
Okay,
about you, about that individual, right? Because something caused me to not be
yeah,
curious.
yep, yep,
Right? So that to me, it never goes away, and I get that that's just maybe my personality, but I think curiosity, the beautiful thing is we all
yeah,
have access to it because anybody can ask a question.
that's right,
Okay, but this was your interview.
okay,
So now you answer
yes,
your
yes.
own question. What helps you stay curious, even as we have sort of the lulls?
Boy, I gotta tell you, I'm not even sure what that looks like for real, about having a lull because everything fascinates me. I feel like a child sometimes. Like
Yes.
uh, I'll start off talking about like, man, is Kiki Palmer still married? And next thing you know, I'm down to Mount Vesuvius and how did those people live? Like for me, it's so what I've discovered is that I'm a systems learner, so everything connects to everything else, and which is great for the work that I do because I'm able to see patterns and trends and things like that, probably a little bit better than normal. So for me, the the thing that keeps me curious is usually the fact that there's somewhere I can use this. I started off my business journey in 2008. I started off my business journey in 2008, and I read like 100 different books about marketing and consulting and blah, blah, blah. And then my business failed. And I was like, oh my God, this is such a waste. I wasted all this time, wasted all this money. And when I started up BE Consulting in 2019, literally everything I could think of was something I had read from back in '08. So everything kind of comes back and everything is useful and everything is connected. And being able to see that interconnectivity keeps me forever curious because it doesn't matter if you're a Nazi or if you're gay or if you have one arm, like everything is relating somehow because as human beings, we're very interconnected, even if we don't know it.
Yeah. I love that as a closing place because I also share that philosophy. We are all
Yeah,
interconnected, and it would do us well to understand that sooner rather than later.
right.
But, I guess that is another question to be curious about. So, Kelly, as we get ready to close out today, is there anything that is coming up in your business that you want to share with people, or how can they get in touch with you?
So usually the easiest place is LinkedIn. You have my email, and I'm sure that you'll be happy to share that. One thing that I have coming up is I'm calling it Beyond the Perks. It's like a online mini conference where I have some vendors who are centrally using like a very culture EQ sort of framework to add value to companies. And it'll be them, it'll be a bunch of businesses, people who are looking to improve culture. So people who are working in like wellness or women's health or mental health or any one of the perks, I'm giving people like a framework to connect it all to make it intentional versus adding one off to your perks. So that'll be probably October. Have my book out, and outside of that, I'm just grinding, putting my head down and working. So if anyone needs help with culture or change management, I'm here.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a
Thank you.
unexpected conversation, also because we just followed that thread of curiosity. Sometimes I just don't know where we're
Yeah.
going to go,
Yep.
but I
Yep.
love it. So thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you. And it has been so great. Thanks, Danielle.
Take care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. It makes a big difference in helping us grow this community. And if you're looking for coaching or resources to take your cultural awareness to the next level, visit us at culture-principles.com/coaching. And remember, where curiosity leads, connection follows. Be well.